and classification of fungi is remaining. Reproduction part of fungi we completed, and now we come towards the classification of fungi weight. Right. Okay. So what are the basis for classification of fungi? First you pay attention. So first basis is type of Hypha. Second, four type. These are the two major criteria which we use for categorize the or classify the fungi into different classes. When we come towards the classification of fungi, and third mode is that the mode of reproduction. And here, when we come towards the classification, so one major criteria whether the sexual reproduction present or absent. So sexual reproduction present, and the second class where sexual reproduction के लिए one term is there that is called as that term is called as basically perfect phase. So we say कि perfect phase is present or perfect phase is absent. So sexual reproduction is present, or you can say perfect phase present and perfect phase absent. When perfect phase is absent or not discovered, one class is only, that is called as deuteromycetes, whereas when sexual reproduction is present, then second criteria we use, that is a type of Hypha. So Hypha, you remember, may be aseptate or it may be Hypha, you remember? The class with aseptate Hypha. What is saying? The class with aseptate Hypha is called as Hyphomycetes. And septate Hypha. So now septate Hypha, further of two types. Either it show uninucleate condition or Hypha show binucleate condition. Secondly, reproductive spores, ascospores, and here the reproductive spores are basidiospores. Okay, so Phycomycetes, aseptate or cenocytic hypha. In NCERT, cenocytic term is provided. So aseptate or cenocytic hypha. Here uninucleate with ascospore. Class is called as Ascomycetes. Basidiospore, binucleate hypha. So class is called as Basidiomycetes. Okay, so this part you remember that how we define or how we provide a classification for fungi. So this is a chart which we generally use for classification of fungi. And now we come towards the one class. So first class which is provided, that is Phycomycetes. And Phycomycetes when we study, so it is called as commonly lower fungi, or they also called as aquatic fungi or algal fungi. Algal fungi means fungi seems like algae as they grow in water. That's why this term we use algal fungi. Objective में आया हुआ है term, ठीक है? So algal fungi आप कह रहे हैं, so don't be confused. Fungi grow in water just like algae. That's why we use the term algal fungi. Now यहाँ पे जब हम इसका classification study करते हैं for Phycomycetes. So first important habitat you remember, the habitat is aquatic habitat. First thing you remember, aquatic habitat is present. Secondly, when you come towards the habitat or when you come towards the structure, so hypha, unbranched, this point is important. Unbranched hypha, septate hypha, as well as Chaemoosmotic or multinucleate hypha. Chaemoosmotic means the number of nuclei. Yesterday we studied. So multinucleate hypha is present. So this you remember. Now after that, when you come towards the mode of reproduction, so in phycomycetes, all the three modes of reproductions are present: vegetative reproduction, asexual reproduction, as well as sexual reproduction. Vegetative reproduction in phycomycetes takes place by fragmentation. Asexual reproduction takes place by zoospore, and sexual reproduction is basically take place by oogamete. Generally, books में लिखा है कि all the three mode of reproductions are present, that isogamy, anisogamy, and oogamy. But predominantly, you remember oogamy is the main mode of reproduction. So this part you remember small chart you prepared for individual each class and decide the place where we have to write. So towards this side we always write heavy or habitat of the hypha or fungi. That right hand side you select for writing the type of hypha. Type of hypha में only आपको remember you remember about the lower fungi or phycomycetes. Rest of three classes: basidiomycetes, deuteromycetes, and ascomycetes. All are showing septate and branch hypha. So septate and branch hypha is a feature of Asco, Basidio, and Deuteromycetes. Aseptate, unbranched, and multinucleate hypha is the feature of phycomycetes, because true and false type of questions generally based on the type of hypha. So this part you remember regarding the hypha, regarding the reproduction. Specific conditions are not provided here. Zygospore is formation. Zygospore means zygote formation. So when this zygote formation proceeds, when the reproduction, sexual reproduction is take place. Okay. And in phycomycetes, example, basically you remember in mode of nutrition, predominantly they are saprophytic, and if aquatic conditions are not possible, so moist soil on wooden logs. They are growing as a saprophyte. Example, rhizopus or braid mold, pink color. That's why pink fungus it is called. Secondly, mucor. Mucor is called as black fungus. म्यूकोरोसिस अभी बहुत ज्यादा सुना था आप लोगों ने, क्लियर है ना? और ब्लैक फंगस आफ्टर ड्यूरिंग कोविड 19 सेकेंड जो आपका वेव था, ड्यूरिंग सेकेंड वेव म्यूकोरोसिस आपने बहुत ज्यादा सुना था. द पेशेंट हु आर सफरिंग फ्रॉम और रिलैक्सिंग फ्रॉम कोरोना इन्फेक्शंस, आफ्टर दैट दे कम बाय द इन्फेक्शन और कम अक्रॉस द इन्फेक्शंस ऑफ म्यूकोरोसिस और ब्लैक फंगस. सो म्यूकर इज कॉमनली कॉल्ड एज ब्लैक फंगस. क्लियर? डेड एंड डिकेइंग टिश्यूज के ऊपर ग्रो करना स्टार्ट करते हैं. एंड वन अनदर इज एजाइजा. ठीक है, कप फंजाई. एजाइजा इज कॉल्ड एज कप फंगस. Okay, so these three examples you remember for what phycomycetes. Whenever you revise fungi, classification of fungi. So you remember the type of hypha, type of spores, and then after you come towards the example. Examples are very important part. Second class इसके बाद है आपका ascomycetes. In ascomycetes आप study कर रहे हैं ascomycetes. Why the name is provided? Because reproductive bodies are ascus, and inside the ascus, ascospores or reproductive spores are produced. So next class when we study, so ascomycetes, and in ascomycetes again a habitat you come towards. So mostly parasite, habitat terrestrial, and along with saprophyte, coprophagus. This term you remember, coprophagus. Coprophagus means they are growing on the dead and decaying waste of the cattle or animals, cow dung, okay, and excretory waste, digestive waste, then they are commonly called as coprophagous. Exceptional condition here, you remember that fungi are generally unicellular, but yeast is unicellular member. And Saccharomyces cerevisiae आप स्टडी कर रहे हैं yeast के लिए, so yeast is a Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Secondly, this yeast is commonly called as brewer's yeast and baker's yeast. In class 12 you studied brewer's yeast when we use in brewing industry for alcohol fermentation, and baker's yeast when we use the yeast or Saccharomyces for baking the different bakery products. So yeast, you simply remember exceptional fungus of Ascomycetes, that is a unicellular fungus. Okay. Now, if we come towards the hypha, so hypha, you remember, hypha is septate and branch, and when it is septate, so it is uninucleate, or uninucleate hypha is called as monokaryotic hypha also. So this part, you remember this tip of one tip of the nature of the hypha. After that, in Ascomycetes, when we come towards reproduction, so most importantly, you remember now the vegetative, because they grow in terrestrial habitat, mostly they grow as a parasitic condition. So vegetative reproduction is generally absent, only and only what is present, the sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. So in reproduction, asexually they reproduce as well as sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction only like the three phases. So it is understood what are these three phases? That is, sorry, plasmogamy, karyogamy and fertilization or fusion. आप study कर रहे हैं karyogamy को, and then meiosis and zygote that yesterday we studied. Those three phases are actually take place in Asco and Basidiomycetes. Okay, and after that asexual reproduction. Note down, अगर note कर रहे हैं तो colored pen से note करेंगे. Predominantly asexual reproduction in Ascomycetes take place by conidia, and in class 12 when you study the reproduction in organism and conidia example study कर रहे हैं, so predominantly conidia formation in class 12 we study in penicillium. So penicillium is the first fungus from which first time antibiotic penicillin is obtained. To penicillium, Alexander Fleming ने penicillium से penicillin को discovered किया है. And then after, you remember conidia are the first. What conidia? Conidia are the main spores, asexual spores, not the sexual spores. So asexual spores conidia are formed. Now when you come towards the sexual reproduction, three phases are completed. So upon three phases here, you remember zygote, divide and produce ascospores. And these ascospores, so what are the meiotic spores? Question आता है, what are the meiotic spores in Ascomycetes? Meiotic spore means the spores which are produced after meiosis division in zygote. So upon meiosis in zygote, in Ascomycetes, ascospores are produced. How many ascospores are produced? So one time meiosis is take place, then mitosis is take place. So ascospores, and these ascospores 8 in number. Secondly, these ascospore produces in sac. This sac is called as ascus, or plurally it is called as asci. So ascus or asci, you remember ascus is a unicellular singular term and asci is a plural term. So this part you remember, the zygote is divided and divide to produce ascospore. Always ascospores are 18 number. So how they produce it? Suppose this is a zygote. So this zygote enter in meiosis, and upon meiosis it will lead to the production of 4 spores. And these 4 spores by simple binary fission further divide and will lead to the production of 8 spores in chain. Out of that 4 are of plus type and 4 are of minus type. So ascospore, one thing for objective purpose you always remember, they are always be 9, sorry, always be 8 in numbers. Out of that, 50% of plus type and 50% are of minus type. This part you remember. And now after that, okay. So ascus, and what is the structure of ascus? So ascus is actually this kind of structure which is made by a specific hypha or special type of hypha. Fusion is take place inside this hypha, and then 8 number of spores are produced. So this part you remember, this is a single ascus, and this single ascus will lead to the production of ascospore. This part, now one word, again one term is provided, that is ascoarp. You go through the NCERT, after that ascospores. So ascospore are meiotic spore or sexual spore. These ascospore produces in ascus a number of ascus combined and form a cup-shaped structure. So ascocarp is a cup-shaped structure which is formed by the fusion and fine network of hypha. So fine network of hypha will lead to the production of, किसकी production के लिए responsible है? They will lead to the production of the Ascocarp is cup-shaped structure, and in this cup-shaped structure, a large number of ascus or asci are present where 8 spores are to be produced. So this part you remember. So what is ascocarp? Ascocarp you write down, and below that you note the fruiting body. So ascocarp are fruiting body of the ascomycetes. Is it clear? Now after that, and this is the reason that first statement is provided. The ascomycetes, the members of ascomycetes are commonly called as sac fungi. Okay, so why it is called sac fungi? Because the sac-like structure ascus are responsible for the production of reproductive spore, ascospore. Now we come towards the example. 3 examples for ascomycetes. You remember as it is, and these 3 examples are, the first example is Neurospora, second example is Claviceps, and third example is provided, that is Aspergillus. Okay, these are the 3 examples. Classical example as it is note करेंगे और underline करिए NCERT में Neurospora, Claviceps and Aspergillus. And in addition to that, one more statement is provided. Last statement, that is one of the most important statement, the models and truffles. Okay, actually in ascomycetes, none of the normally fungus are parasitic. No fungus is used for edible purpose. But morel truffles are one of the delicious fungus. So morel truffles के side में आप लिख लीजिएगा edible. अगर note कर रहे हैं, otherwise only go through the NCERT. Additional part पहले ही का है. You can write down in NCERT itself. Like ascospore का part है, पहले note भी किया होगा. And in case if it is not, so you note down all the things. So NCERT only आपका prepared होते रहेगा. So moral truffles repeatedly आ रहा है. Moral truffles belongs to, so they belong to ascomycetes and edible fungus of ascomycetes. So morels and truffles. Now Neurospora is used in extensively used in genetics, biochemical analysis, and genetics. So in fungi, Neurospora is called as Drosophila of kingdom. So just like in animals, whatever experiment of the genetics we perform on Drosophila, similarly in fungi, if we want to study the DNA or if we want to study RNA and protein synthesis, so which fungus we commonly use? We use the Neurospora. तो ये याद रखेंगे Neurospora extensively कहाँ पे use हो रहा है? It is extensively used in genetics. क्लैविसेप्स आप कह रहे हैं, ठीक है. न्यूरोस्पोरा को सेपरेटली यहाँ पे बुक में एरो करके लिख लीजिए. ड्रोसोफिला ऑफ प्लेंटी किंगडम कहते हैं और ड्रोसोफिला नोट डाउन. क्लैविसेप्स इज एयरबॉर्न फंगस. So airborne disease is caused by claviceps, and for claviceps separately note down. ठीक है, this claviceps is aflatoxin, प्रोड्यूस करते हैं LSD प्रोडक्शन, and LSD is one of the hallucinogen. So that's why you remember claviceps को हम क्या कह रहे हैं? Claviceps is called as hallucinogenic fungus. So it is called as hallucinogenic fungus और hallucinogens cause करते हैं. So drug addictions में generally इसको use किया जाता है. So these 3 points in addition to NCERT you separately note down, because in drug addictions when we come then we study the hallucinogenic fungus. ठीक है? तो ये part यहाँ पे याद रखिए additionally. And disease क्या cause कर रहा है? Claviceps causes ergot is called as ergot fungi because it causes a ergot disease in ergot disease in cattle. So whenever claviceps causes an infection in wheat grain, it causes an infection in moist rice grain, and that kind of wheat and rice grain consumed for a long time by human or by uh, basically by the cattle, then it is responsible for the ergot disease. That disease है, and ergot fungus and ergot disease जब आप कह रहे हैं तो part आता है body का कि which part of body it is affected by the fungus or which part of the body affected during the ergotism. तो ergot fungus आपका किसको affect कर रहा है? Central nervous system and gastrointestinal tract, GIT याद रखेंगे. So gastrointestinal tract, initially it affects the gastrointestinal tract and then after it causes a effect on central nervous system. So this part you remember. And aspergillus, aspergillus को आप commonly क्या कह रहे हैं? Aspergillus is commonly called as weed of laboratory. Whenever in any of the laboratory, if you want to start the function with work or culture with or growth of a bacteria, growth of fungi, if you want to start, okay, then first fungus which is growing on that medium is always the aspergillus. One of the most widely present fungus, जिसके spores हमारे अपने surrounding में भी present होते हैं, but they are microscopic, so we can't observe them. So aspergillus, you remember, weed of laboratory. न्यूरोस्पोरा ड्रोसोफिला ऑफ प्लांट किंगडम हम कह रहे हैं इसको और बायोलॉजिकल किंगडम. सेकेंडली इट इज यूज्ड इन बायोकेमिकल इन्वेस्टिगेशन ऑफ जेनेटिक्स, क्योंकि इन 3 से क्वेश्चन रिपीटेड भी आ रहे हैं. क्लेविसेप्स एर्गोट फंगस एंड दिस एर्गोट फंगस, ठीक है, produces aflatoxin, it produces LSD as well as it is responsible for producing hallucinogenic effects, so commonly called as hallucinogens. ठीक है, अब hallucinogen के लिए क्वेश्चन आ रहा है और उसमें अगर आपका क्लैविसेप्स ऑप्शन नहीं है तो hallucinogens के लिए one more hallucinogenic fungus is Amencia, one of the toxic fungus, and secondly hallucinogenic fungus. ठीक है, so some papers in some years instead of claviceps Amencia option is there. So Amencia is actually the asexual phase of claviceps. ठीक है, ड्यूट्रोमाइसिटीज में जब आप स्टडी कर रहे हैं तो इन ड्यूट्रोमाइसिटीज it is called as amencia. When you studied it under ascomycetes, when sexual reproduction takes place, so the new name for sexual reproduction phase is provided, that is claviceps. So fungus is same, but in asexual phase or imperfect phase, it is amencia, and in sexual phase or perfect phase it is claviceps. So this is the second class, that is the ascomycetes, and after ascomycetes जो next हम study करते हैं that is basidiomycetes. Important feature of basidiomycetes is that asexual reproduction is completely absent in basidiomycetes. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे अब next हम study करते हैं basidiomycetes. एंड इन बेसिडियोमाइसिटीज को जब आप स्टडी करेंगे तो बेसिडियोमाइसिटीज में कॉल्ड एज पॉपकॉर्न then bracket fungi, or it is also called as club fungi. ठीक है, so these are the different names which are provided for the fungus, so all fungus, bracket fungi or love fungi. Secondly, if you come towards habitat, so again terrestrial and parasite on crop plant, basically. And next is parasite on crop plant and as well as free living. Free living forms are mushroom and mushroom is agaricus. ठीक है, so which of the following edible fungus? Edible fungus always आप याद रखते हैं, you always remember mushroom, but remember the scientific name agaricus. After that, देखिए again we come towards the hypha. So what is the hypha? Hypha is here septate plus along with septate hypha we studied that hypha is branch. Identical feature is that binucleate. Binucleate means N plus and type, not two N type. So two different nuclei plus and minus strain available. So N plus N type of Hypha is available. After that, in basidiomycetes, when you start to study, so here towards this side we come towards reproduction. And in reproduction, okay, what we are using the term in basidiomycetes, that asexual reproduction is completely absent. Most important thing, asexual reproduction is completely absent. Only sexual reproduction and vegetative reproduction. And vegetative reproduction is take place by fragmentation. Clear is sexual reproduction? Sexual reproduction by basidiospore. And second is three phases, not special type of gamete formation or anything. Those three phases which we study in sexual reproduction, three phases are present during the sexual reproduction of the fungi. Next, when we come towards the basidiomycetes, so in basidiomycetes reproduction में आप study कर रहे हैं. So in sexual reproduction, ठीक है, when fusion is take place and upon fusion, hypha आपका किस में convert हुआ? Uninucleate, two type of mycelium are there. First thing you remember, initially primary hypha or primary mycelium. This primary hypha is either plus type or minus type. Suppose this is plus type. So this another one is minus type. So this part you remember, either the hypha is of plus type or minus type. So uninucleate hypha short duration के लिए available है. And after that both the hypha show the plasmogamy, and upon plasmogamy it will result in the formation of binucleate hypha. This binucleate condition of the hypha or mycelium is called as secondary hypha or secondary mycelium. This secondary mycelium shows the presence of both nuclei, that is plus and minus type of nuclei. And after that, once the plus and minus nuclei are formed, then what is happening? The hook-like structures are formed. These hook-like structures, yesterday we studied clamp connection. So what is clamp connection? Clamp connection means hook-like structure which are appear in the hypha of basidiomycetes at the time of formation of basidiospore. So plasmogamy is completed here. After plasmogamy, the secondary hypha or secondary mycelium exists for a long duration. Then after clamp connections, clamp-like structures are formed and like this. Actually, this is a hypha, but they appear like clamp. That's why we say clamp connection. And now these nuclei are transferred into these hypha. Once they enter into the hypha, okay, so the secondary mycelium it becomes devoid of nucleus, and now the nuclei enter inside the clamps, और इसी को बुक्स में क्या लिखा हुआ है? बेसिडियम. the spatial hypha. And inside the basidium, yesterday we studied, inside the basidium, fusion of zygote is take place. So now both the nuclei plus and minus or karyogamy. So where does the karyogamy take place in basidiomycetes? For objective, you remember, basidium is formed as a clamp connection, and then this basidium show the fertilization or karyogamy. Whereas in ascomycetes, karyogamy is itself take place inside the mycelium. No spatial structures are formed. Once the spatial zygote formation is take place, then after in ascomycetes, ascus formation and ascocarp and ascospores are formed. Here before fertilization or karyogamy, basidium is formed. So basidium का up structure कैसे हो गया? Now the basidium is diploid structure, and inside this basidium, this zygote divide. Along with division of zygote, the basidium is also divided and will result in the formation of four spores. So that's why basidiospores are exospores. Basidiospores never protected inside the bag-like structure or sac-like structure. They are exposed to air or exposed to wind. That's why basidium अब किसमें convert हुआ? Now the basidium is diploid. This diploid basidium show the meiosis, and upon meiosis it will result in the formation of basidiospores. And basidiospores, you remember, again they are haploid and they releases in air and germinate. Soil में germinate होंगे. Dispersion हमेशा में indicate हुआ है. When they settle in moist soil, they get germinate, and upon germination, they will result in the formation of plus or minus type of mycelium. So this part actually provided in NCERT, that the spores, the basidiospores are exospore or exogenously formed, and fertilization or karyogamy and meiosis is take place. तो karyogamy and meiosis, you remember, बिल्कुल ध्यान से समझिए इन सब चीजों को. The karyogamy and meiosis is take place inside the basidium, and then entire basidium get modified into the basidiospores. ठीक है? तो ये आपके फीचर्स हुए किसके लिए? Basidiomycetes के लिए. Conidia, asexual reproduction is absent. That's why conidia are completely absent in basidiomycetes. When we come towards the examples, तो examples देखिए. Basidiomycetes include rust fungus. The rust fungus is Oxinia graminis. So in Oxinia is a fungus, and Oxinia fungus, rust fungus, कहाँ पे cause कर रहा है? Oxinia growing on wheat, so it causes wheat rust. So wheat is a host and Oxinia is a fungus. So wheat rust cause हो रहा है. Secondly, the another example is smut fungus. So rust and smut are the two examples, important example of basidiomycetes. Smut fungus आपका है Astillego. Examples are provided, and this Astillego is generally growing on barley and wheat. So deadly disease of wheat are rust and smut. Once the disease caused, rust and smut disease caused in wheat, then the entire loss of the crop is take place to the farmer. ठीक है? So these two disease, and after that mushroom दिया हुआ है example में. So mushroom we already studied. Mushroom means agaricus, edible mushroom, and basically they are the rich source of the protein. So this much part you remember basically for the basidiomycetes. If you have any doubts or confusion, so in next class immediately ask those part. रीड करिए उसको एनसीईआरटी को. इवनिंग में एक बार रीड करिए इतना पार्ट, देन नेक्स्ट डे मॉर्निंग में रीड करिए, and then try to solve the questions of particular these topics only. And after basidiomycetes, next is deuteromycetes. Next class. So deuteromycetes, commonly called as imperfect fungi, or this imperfect fungi, you remember, is again called as, so it is called as imperfect fungi, or it is, you remember, it is called as dustbin fungus. Again, terrestrial parasite. Okay. Genomic important causes loss to crop. Okay. So this you remember. Now when you come towards the hypha, so hypha same होगा. Hypha, septate, branch, but here it is uninucleate. Binucleate hypha, they only appear predominantly in basidiomycetes. So septate, branched and uninucleate hypha we appear. After deuteromycetes when you come here, so we study about reproduction. Reproduction is only vegetative and asexual. Vegetative by fragmentation. See, yesterday we studied the vegetative reproduction takes place by fragmentation, budding and fission. Okay, but everywhere we study the fragmentation only is the mode of vegetative reproduction. Where the budding and fission is present, so you remember budding and fission is only the feature of the yeast. In Ascomycetes, unicellular fungus yeast only reproduced mainly, not only, mainly reproduced by budding as well as by binary fission. Otherwise, rest of fungi, if show the vegetative reproduction, so they always show by the fragmentation phenomena. Okay, so vegetative reproduction by fragmentation, asexual reproduction is mainly take place by conidia. What is conidia? ये सब part clear है. ठीक है, so it is mainly take place by conidia. Sexual phase of life or sexual mode of reproduction is completely absent, but in future, after 5 year, 10 year, or 20 year later, any of the scientists discovered the sexual phase of reproduction in the member of Deuteromycetes. So sexual reproduction may be, it means कि the fungus may be Ascomycetes or it belongs to the Basidiomycetes. ये बिल्कुल क्लियर रखेंगे क्योंकि फाइकोमाइसिटिस तो आपके पास है नहीं बिकॉज फाइकोमाइसिटिस इज टोटली आपका कहाँ पे है फाइकोमाइसिटिस इज टोटली इन एक्वेटिक कंडीशंस so it never be growing in terrestrial habitat and parasitic form it never be grow so that's why whenever sexual reproduction is discovered in Deuteromycetes fungus then the fungus transferred to either Ascomycetes or Basidiomycetes and on which basis so on the basis of the spores the fungus is transferred to Asco or Basidiomycetes. So this part you remember. Now conidia is the only the mode of reproduction in case of the Deuteromycetes. Whenever you revise Deuteromycetes, this thing you remember the sexual reproduction is absent. So this word you remember imperfect fungi most important and questions for Deuteromycetes is only asked for its example. Three examples are provided. Again, here you see three examples are there. One is alternaria. Second is Coleto, trichum, and third example is trichoderma. Okay, so this trichoderma you remember. So now three fungi are there. So Alternaria, Coleto-trichum and Trichoderma. Alternaria when we study, so Alternaria causes late blight of potato or blight of potato disease. Entire crop of the potato gets lost whenever there is an infection of Alternaria. Coleto-trichum, frequently asked question. Coleto-trichum NCERT में नहीं है, नीचे लीजिएगा उसके red rot of sugarcane. So red rot of sugarcane is take place in Coleto-trichum. ठीक है, whenever you observe the sugarcane, so sometimes the center section of the sugarcane is appear reddish in color. That reddish part is rotten, and that toxin of the fungus provide a red color of that sugarcane. So that disease is called as red rot of sugarcane. And trichoderma, human health and disease में आप study कर रहे हैं trichoderma, microsporium and epidermophyton. These three fungus when mixed together in a specific proportion or brought together in specific proportion, then they will responsible for ringworm. So trichoderma basically in humans causes ringworms और स्किन एलर्जीज हम स्टडी कर रहे हैं. So all these three fungus you remember. ये क्वेश्चन इससे आया है which of the following is not belongs to the imperfect fungi and aspergillus is one of the option. So whatever examples are provided for fungi as it is you remember. ठीक है, and as it is you solve the recall those members because one or two question every year are asked on the basis of the members of the fungi. Is it clear? तो ये पार्ट इतना याद रखेंगे यहाँ पे. अब इसके बाद देखिए एस्कोमैसिटीज के बाद यहाँ फंगस आपका फंजाई का जो क्लासिफिकेशन है वो कंप्लीट है. एंड नाउ आफ्टर दैट इन एनसीईआरटी वन पैराग्राफ फॉर प्लांटी एंड वन पैराग्राफ फॉर एनिमेलिया इज प्रोवाइडेड. So that we are not going to discuss here. ठीक है, because that is a general paragraph for animalia. Now we come towards the next topic. That next topic is virus. ठीक है, और वायरस जब आप स्टडी कर रहे हैं तो in virus two paragraphs are provided in NCERT. These two paragraphs are very important. So read very carefully. So when we come towards virus, first you remember acellular because protoplasm is absent. ठीक है, so due to complete absence of protoplasm absent is mentioned there. So due to complete absence of protoplasm, metabolism is completely absent, and that's why they're not considered as a cellular structure or they're not considered as a non-living structure. They're commonly called as acellular structure. Secondly, when you come towards virus, they are linked between living and non-living, obligate parasites. So they are obligate parasite. And next जब हम study कर रहे हैं after obligate parasite, so here you remember viruses में आप study कर रहे हैं कि viruses are nucleo protein particles. So they are only made up of nucleic acid and proteins in terms of particles. Discovery देखिए, three scientists are related with discovery. ठीक है, firstly Pasteur, provide term Hypha, that is poisonous. But Pasteur के वर्क को ही कंटिन्यू किया है इवेनोवस्की 1832. ठीक है, एंड देन ईयर देख लीजिएगा एक बार 1830 1800 ये 30 इवेनोवस्की discover toxic nature of tobacco mosaic virus. So TMV you remember. ठीक है, और TMV is first time discovered by, so Ivanovsky first time discovered the tobacco mosaic virus, and he also observed that the extract of infectious plant may be that year a little bit 68 or something. 1892 okay Manya. So next one 1898, 1832, 1892, and then next one is 98. Check for Beijing. Yes. And then 1935 है ना, तो मुझसे भी गलती हो गई. हाँ ठीक है, थैंक यू. ठीक है, एंड आपको मैंने क्लास 12 के लिंक सेंड नहीं किया क्या मान्या? बिकॉज यस्टरडे इवन योर request also not come and class also you not join yesterday, so I thought whether I send you or not. बाद में इन्फॉर्म कर दीजिएगा मुझे, ठीक है? So Ivanovsky discovered toxic nature of TMV, and second scientist बेजरिंग, ठीक है, बेजरिंग केम 1898, अभी भी गलती हो रही है मुझे लग रहा है, नहीं ठीक है, 1898 give the term contagium vivum fluidum. तो कंटेजियम वाइवम फ्लूइडम, यू रिमेम्बर कंटेजियम वाइवम फ्लूइडम का मीनिंग है the toxic element which present in plant. Okay beta, I will provide you today and that video also I will provide. So Beijering observed that the extract of infectious plant of the tobacco when spray on the healthy plant of tobacco, then the same symptoms and same diseases appear on the tobacco plant. ठीक है, and that's why we provide that concept the contagium vivum fluidum. Latin में italics में लिखा हुआ है, so that part you remember, that is called as Beijering provides the concept of contagium vivum fluidum. And then after W.M. Stanley in 1935, most important invention, crystallized virus and crystals are made up of protein. तो किसके बने हुए हैं? These crystals are made up of protein. This part you remember, the crystals of virus. So that's why this is acellular, because no living being we can crystallize in powder form, but virus can be crystallized and kept in powdered form for a long duration of time. And when these crystals again inject or placed over the host surface, so again they come in conditions of the living being, or they start to behave as a living being. So this part you remember, Ivanovsky, Beijering and Stanley. Okay, these three scientists play significant role, remember as it is. And then after, here we study the structure. So in structure only two terms we use. One is capsid and the second is genetic material. Protoplasm, cytoplasm, cytosol completely absent. So genetic material. That capsid is protein coat. Its single unit is called capsomere. And secondly, okay, so single unit is called capsomere, coat is proteinaceous coat, and capsid you remember synthesized in host body. So whenever proteinaceous capsid is developed, it always be developed inside the host, and for that viruses are capable to use the machinery. Word बिल्कुल याद रखेंगे, they are not having their own protoplasm, but they are capable to utilize the machinery of the host cell. Okay, so this part you remember, genetic material you remember, most important statement. ठीक है, आज मॉर्निंग की क्लास में ही हम लोगों ने स्टूडेंट्स ने यहाँ पे सुनती थी एंड अमृता इज देयर ओनली. तो नंबर ऑफ प्लेंटी ऑफ क्वेश्चंस, नियरली 25-30, प्लेंटी मींस वायरस के लिए बहुत है वो, 25 नियरली क्वेश्चंस हम लोगों ने सॉल्व किए थे वायरस के, एंड आउट ऑफ 25 nearly 9 to 10 questions are there which related with this statement, the genetic material is either DNA or RNA, but not both. ठीक है, so either DNA is present as a genetic material or RNA present as a genetic material, but both DNA and RNA together never be present as a genetic material. तो यहाँ पे याद रखेंगे genetic material में genetic material DNA और RNA as genome or genetic material, but never be both. So both never present together, either or conditions में present होंगे. And when we come towards genetic material, so two diagrams are provided. One first diagram is provided TMG, and in TMG single stranded RNA, note down over there. The single-stranded RNA is the genetic material of the TMP. Question already asked, and it is not provided anywhere in NCERT. Only in that diagram it is shown RNA, but type of RNA is not mentioned. But you look into the diagram, red color foil is there. That is a single-stranded RNA. And second diagram is for bacteriophage. In bacteriophage means a virus which causes the infection in bacteria. That virus is called as bacteriophage. And in bacteriophage, double-stranded DNA is a genetic material. So this part you remember. And secondly, this capsid or capsomere. This also you remember. The capsomeres arrange in different geometric patterns. So capsomere arrange in helical form, in cuboidal form, as well as in various geometric patterns. So in different geometric patterns here you remember the capsomeres are present. So this part you remember very well. Okay. Now after that देखिए यहाँ पे इतना part याद रखना है. So shape से related all the viruses are helical. So wrong होगा आपका statement because some of the viruses may be helical, cubical, cuboidal, स्पाइरल वेराइटी ऑफ शेप आपके हो सकते हैं. ठीक है, सिलेंड्रिकल भी हो सकते हैं. तो वेरियस ज्योमेट्रिक पैटर्न दे शो एज द कैप्सोमियर अरेंजमेंट इज टेक प्लेस. तो ये पार्ट यहाँ पे याद रखिएगा. ठीक है. नाउ जो इन्फेक्शन कॉज होते हैं, वायरस कॉजेस इन्फेक्शन. तो लीफ, मोज़ेक, these are the symptoms. And leaf curling. Secondly, vein clearing, chlorosis, loss of green color and leaf become yellow in structure. That is called as chlorosis, as well as stunted growth. If these features are appear in plant, that means the virus is infected by the plant is infected by the virus. Next, again most important part, that two type of viruses we observe. In animal also they causes infection, as well as they causes infection in plant. So plant viruses, you remember, plant viruses generally made up of DNA. RNA. Plant viruses. So this part you note down because it is not provided in NCERT, but this statement in true and false repeatedly asked. The plant viruses generally RNA viruses, but CMV exceptionally DNA virus. Okay. So cauliflower, CMV means cauliflower mosaic virus. So cauliflower mosaic virus exceptionally a DNA virus. Otherwise, most of the all plant viruses are RNA virus. So plant viruses are RNA. Exception is CMV. Similarly, animal viruses. इसका just opposite. Animal viruses क्या होंगे? Generally DNA virus in animal. DNA virus causes the infection, so generally it is a DNA virus. ठीक है, but again exception is there for animal. Exception क्या है आपके पास? HIV is exception because HIV कैसा है? HIV is RNA virus. Now corona is also exception because corona also the RNA virus, and RNA पहले भी कहा है आप लोगों को, RNA viruses are always problematic for human being. That you study that how the HIV in human health आप study करते हैं कि how HIV causes a change when it enters from one person to another person. ठीक है, तो ये part यहाँ पे important statement in viruses. Firstly, these three theories you remember, scientists you remember very well along with their work. Genetic material either or condition, both genetic material RNA DNA never present. Then plant viruses are always a RNA viruses, exception is CMV. And animal viruses are generally DNA viruses, but exception is HIV. Okay, this much you remember, and then after next term आपका दिया हुआ है, so this much you remember for the viruses. Replication related questions if asked, so lytic and lysogenic cycles used by the viruses, that is not the part of this part chapter. आप कहाँ पे पढ़ते हैं उसको? When we come towards the Hershey and Chase experiment in class 12. Then we study how the lytic cycle affect the transmission of virus from one cell to another cell. तो ये इतना part NCERT के according हम strictly study कर रहे हैं. So this much you remember for the viruses. And now after viruses, one new term provide है आपका, that is a virioid. अब देखिए आप जब ऑप्शन सॉल्व करेंगे तो एक आपका होता है वायरस, one term is virion and one is virioid. ठीक है, वायरस inside host and living. Okay, nucleoprotein particle. Virion, these both are the particles of nucleic acid and protein. So they are nucleoprotein and nucleic acid, DNA or RNA. Okay, virion, inert or non-living form. Inert or non-living form of virus. So on any of the surface, when virus is present, or suppose the death of host body is take place, then the virus is present on that dead surface, ठीक है, or any of the surrounding surface. So that in that case, virus become inert or it behave as a non-living. So non-living form of virus or inert form of virus which located on any of the surface, that is actually called as virion. Okay. It is exactly similar with virus, but it is incapable to replicate. Virus are capable to replicate, but they replicate only inside the host cell. Okay. And next is virioid. Virioid आपका क्या है? Virioid is or viroids हम कह रहे हैं. So viroids are most important free naked RNA. Okay, so single-stranded RNA is present, freely present. That means the protein coat is completely absent around that RNA. Then that free infectious naked RNA or free infectious RNA is called as viroid. So now we come towards the viroid. 4-5 statements. One is viroid, one is prion, and then after ligands are provided, and along with ligands, chapter आपका ये complete हो जाएगा, ठीक है? So next देखिए viroids, host TO Diner 1971. Secondly, pre-infectious RNA. Again important for true and false. Smaller than virus. Virus is smaller than bacteria. ठीक है? So in case if question is regarding bacteria, virus, viroids. So first bacteria, then virus, and then viroids. Because viroids are the small, but it is a chemical agent. It is not a living. Smallest living being is always mycoplasma. Don't be confused. Because mycoplasma is a living cell. But when we come towards the chemical agent, so smallest chemical agent is viroid because it is smaller than the viruses. ठीक है, so smaller than viruses. Secondly, viroid के लिए याद रखेंगे यहाँ पे most again important. All 3-4 statements are important. RNA is of low molecular weight. Wrong statement में high molecular weight आता है. So for that you remember RNA is of low molecular weight. And then after viroids के लिए आप study कर रहे हैं causes potato spindle tuber disease. So these statements, 5 statements, you have to remember for the viroids. Okay? तो ये पार्ट यहाँ पे याद रखेंगे viroids के लिए, and then after आप अगर स्टडी करते हैं तो आप यहाँ पे याद रखेंगे. ठीक है? Now we come towards prions. ठीक है? So when we study about prions, so prions, P of prions, you remember? So prions are टेबल के फॉर्म में ड्रॉ कर लीजिए. तो prions आपके क्या होगा? Infectious protein particle. That means generally you see the genetic material of virus is having the capacity to cause a infection. But when there is no capacity to cause an infection for when there is no capacity in genetic material, instead of genetic material, when the proteinaceous part or capsid is showing capacity to cause an infection, then that infectious protein particle is called as prion. So basic difference is clear. In viruses, any of the genetic material is having capacity to cause a disease, and virus means protein coat plus nucleic acid, then it is called virus. Viroids means only free infectious RNA is called as, or naked RNA is called as viroid, and secondly viroids restricted होंगे, and in viroid protein coat is completely absent. But in some cases when that protein is capable to cause a disease, so that infectious protein is called as prions. ठीक है? तो prion आप याद रखेंगे, infectious protein particle. Secondly, prions अगर आप स्टडी करते हैं तो prions आपके कॉज कर रहे हैं डिजीज. So what diseases they caused? So first, Kuru disease in human. In NCERT, CJD affect central nervous system. CJD भी आपका सेम डिजीज है, न्यू नेम प्रोवाइड किया गया है CJD के लिए. ठीक है? तो यहाँ पे याद रखेंगे जैकब डिजीज कहते हैं CJD. Creutzfeldt Jakob disease, name of the person where first time it is discovered. So Jacob disease or Creutzfeldt Jacob disease उसका नेम है. CJD आप याद रखिए. What is happening? Degeneration, regular degeneration of brain, that is neurons of the brain, followed by dementia, and then followed by death of person. So generally question raised की direct question की Kuru disease or CJD, or which part it is affected. So central nervous system is affected during the Kuru disease. Second disease जो cause हो रहा है यहाँ पे, second disease you remember, that is mad cow disease in cattle. Generally it is called mad cow disease, but it is again it affects the central nervous system of cattle and causes a mad cow disease. तो ये part आप याद रखेंगे. This part you remember for the prion. And after prion, one another topic is provided, that is the lichens. तो lichens हम study करते हैं, and in lichens, तो lichen normally सभी को clear होगा. Symbiotic or mutual association. Secondly, after symbiotic or mutual association. ठीक है? What we are saying, symbiotic and after mutual association. Next we studied that the two individual symbionts are there. Symbionts are phycobiont and mycobiont. Phycobiont word we use for algal partner, and mycobiome word we use for fungal partner. So phycobiome and mycobiome. Okay. Now what is the function? So fungi function. It provides protection, encourage, and water plus mineral to fungi. Sorry, to algae. So what is the function of the fungi? So fungi help provide a protection to algae. It provides helpful in encourage of algae, plus it provides water plus mineral to the algae or phycobiome. In terms, what does algae do? Algae synthesize food and small amount of food provided to fungi. So in this respect, they both are dependent on each other, and because of that आप study करते हैं, ठीक है? कि because of that both are growing together in such a way. If we observe the lichen, so we can't say fungi and algae, two different individuals are associated with this structure. Because fungi are heterotrophic and algae are autotrophic. So symbiotic association between autotroph and heterotroph. So that is also the answer is lichens. ठीक है? अब lichens देखिए, lichens के लिए एक word use होता है crustose lichen. So crustose lichen means when grow on rock. And second, foliose lichen, leaf-like structure on moist soil or bark of the tree. So whenever they grow on bark or on moist soil, they appear as a foliose lichen or leaf-like structure. When they grow on the bare rock, then they are commonly called as crustose lichen. So this term you remember because repeatedly this term is also asked. So crustose lichen you remember. Now lichen, most important aspect of lichen that they are indicator of air pollution. This air pollution is caused by SO2 increase level. And what is the impact? How we find that the area affected by SO2 pollution? So in fresh air lichens are present. ठीक है ना? तो ये पार्ट याद रखेंगे. In fresh air lichens are growing on tree trunk. In polluted air lichen disappears. Okay, so this part we remember how they causes a indicator. ठीक है, how they causes a effect on air whenever SO2 level, क्योंकि यहाँ पे ऐसा ये कहीं बुक में नहीं दिया है. आपका pollution के चैप्टर में लास्ट 16 चैप्टर ऑफ द क्लास 12 में दिया है. ऐसा SO2 pollution increases in air. ठीक है, it causes acid rain and secondly it cause also responsible for loss of the lichen. So soil का and tree trunk पे जो natural वो था content of the nutrient, that natural nutrient content is slowly decreases, so it indirectly affects the growth of the plant also. So this much part you remember, and with this अपना ये chapter completed. So not tomorrow क्योंकि hardly 10 minutes are there, so we are not going to start the chapter. Tomorrow we will start the kingdom plenty. ठीक है, एंड इन किंगडम प्लेंटी मे बी टुमारो की हो सकता है कल थोड़ी लिटिल बिट क्लास लेंदी हो जाए, बट वी विल ट्राई टू complete entire kingdom plenty tomorrow itself because algae, bryophyta and pteridophyta only आपको study करना है. Gymnosperm much more similar to the pteridophyta. In revision classes we never revise the angiosperm because angiosperm strictly सेकेंड चैप्टर रिप्रोडक्शन में स्टडी कर रहे हैं. देन मॉर्फोलॉजी इन प्लांट में भी आप इसको स्टडी करते हैं एंजियोस्पर्म को. So 4 divisions of the plenty tomorrow we will discuss. So with tomorrow we will complete the plenty and then after we come towards the Animalia kingdom, है ना? तो Animalia आपका फिर कल Thursday है. So Friday, Saturday and Sunday तक नहीं जाएंगे. Friday and Saturday 2 days में 1 day invertebrates and 1 day vertebrates. ठीक है, 2 days में Animalia कंप्लीट कर लेंगे और उसी फॉर्म में आपको स्पीड मेंटेन करके रखनी है पढ़ने की. तो प्रिया है, स्मृति, प्रज्ञा, मान्या, श्रेया. ओके, श्रेया ने ज्वाइन किया है आज. स्कूल्स नहीं है आज. ओके, अपूर्वा एंड आदित्य. नाउ शिफा ने स्किप किया है एंड हु इज टुडे. And secondly, the class 12 students who are there, those who now try to give the Saturday test theory subjective test in offline schedule. Though you come in morning 9 o'clock, 9:15, 9:20 also you can come on Saturday and individually you give your test for 11th and chapter 12. Okay, so Shreya already provided. So Shreya only will give the objective test, but rest of student will try to give the subjective test of the chapter 11 and 12. Okay.